Welcome to the Soul Grit Podcast. I'm Ann Taylor McNeese, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also love Jesus, and I'm passionate about all things gospel and therapy. I created Soul Grit to be at the intersection of mental health and Christian faith. Christ followers need a place to ask questions and get answers about mental health. Join me as we dive into real stories and real questions from people who want to honor God with their hearts, souls, and minds. Hi, welcome back to the Soul Grit Podcast. I'm Ann, and I'm here with Jess, and we're back just kind of in our Christmas break. Not exactly sure what the Soul Grit Podcast future is for the next couple of weeks, as I'm still recovering from my stroke. If you didn't hear that story, it's on the previous episode that I released right at the beginning of December. And I'll link that in the show notes in case you didn't hear about that. But I did have a little stroke in November, which caused me to have a different December than I ever have had before, where I've mostly been on the couch and mostly not doing any of the things that you would expect to do during the holiday season. So, Jess, say hello.
Hi, guys.
You also had a little bit different of a holiday season, right?
Yeah, just between illness, just launching that body series and you had your stroke. And then my family has just had back-to-back illness, either my extended family or my family. So, and then with the weather, I've just been staying in too. So, yeah.
Yeah, tell us a
Different,
little bit
different
about what's
reasons.
going on with the weather there in the Midwest.
Oh yeah, it applies to what we're talking about a little bit today. We'll talk about it. But no, so it has been frigid cold, which Indiana is known for being cold, but like colder than normal cold. So -35 wind chill, running like our electric heat and our furnace. So whenever it's that cold, I definitely do not leave the house. I don't like leaving the house if it's under 32. So definitely not when we're in the negative.
Yeah. So today we wanted to talk about spoon theory. If you've heard of this before, this will all make sense. And if you haven't, we're going to explain it and talk about why we wanted to. But things have been really different for us in the last couple of months. And so we're approaching life a little bit differently because of that. We have limited physical ability and mental and emotional ability, and that's really changed the outlook. So let me just explain a little bit about what spoon theory is. So back in 2003, a woman named Christine Miserandino was talking to her friends during a dinner or something like that. And she had her best friend asked her what it was like to have lupus. It's an autoimmune illness that she has chronically that causes pain, causes fatigue, causes her not to be able to live her life in the way that she would like to. So it's really hard for other people to understand when you have an illness like that. We might call these like the invisible illnesses, where on the outside you look pretty normal. You don't have bumps and bruises. You're not wearing a cast or a bandage. You're not limping or having a cane or a wheelchair, but there's something going on the inside that prevents you from functioning the way that you would like to function. And I also think that mental illnesses often fall in this category of invisible illnesses because you look fine.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you have some type of like psychotic illness like schizophrenia or something where you're acting really strange, you won't know necessarily if somebody has anxiety or depression or one of these common mental illnesses. So this woman, Christine, she explained to her friends just using what she had on hand. They were eating dinner. She grabbed the spoons from the table and she said, imagine that you only had a certain number of spoons in a day, and spoons being just a random illustration for the amount of energy that you have. So units of energy. So you have a certain number of spoons, and some days you get more than others. And she described how certain tasks or activities uh, used a certain number of units. So let's say brushing your teeth might cost you 1 spoon, but getting up and going to work is like 4 spoons.
Yeah.
So throughout your day, you're required to pay via spoons for all the activities that you do. And sometimes you just don't have as many, or the things that you do cost more spoons for a person with an illness than they do for a person without an illness. Jess, do you think I'm explaining this right?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great way to put it because I think with the spoon theory, like you said, it's just kind of a random a random thing that she just happened to pull to talk about units of energy. And I think the thing to emphasize, and you said it really well, is that sometimes we can start with less spoons than maybe someone who's not struggling with some type of an illness. But also in that it can cost more spoons. So you might start with less, and certain activities are costing more spoons than someone who is not struggling.
Mhm.
And so that can be really important in terms of the impact of what our spoons are doing, what we're doing with our
Mhm.
spoons.
So if you're a normal, healthy, high functioning person, like brushing your teeth is not even something that you consider to be a drain of energy.
Yeah, it might not even take spoons. And I did hear one person was talking about spoons, and they talked about like for some people taking a shower costs spoons, but
Mhm.
for some people that might actually give back spoons.
Yeah.
And so, that is a piece to consider as well.
Yeah. So what I see sometimes with people, especially like with depression, I would say, like brushing teeth and taking a shower and doing those personal hygiene items that you do every single day, those tend to cost a lot of spoons for people with depression.
Yeah.
But if you're not depressed and your body's feeling pretty good, like those are just normal, the things that you do to get to the other things that are going to cost you energy.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're talking about it, I was just thinking about a conversation I just had with my husband yesterday, and he was dealing with a little bit of anxiety and was like, I just felt the need to go stand outside, which it's frigid cold here. Okay. I just felt like I needed to go stand outside, and going and standing outside for him added spoons back
Mhm.
for him. But when I go stand outside because it's frigid cold, it takes my spoons, right? And so I think it's important that we don't get too caught up in well, this is how many spoons everything costs for everybody, because it's going to be very different for each individual person. So you can tailor, that's what I liked about it, is you can tailor it to what your needs are, what your personality is, and where you're at each day. Because I think each day it can change, right? Like if you're having a pretty good day, it might only cost 1 spoon to take a shower. But like you said, if you're in a very low spot in depression, it could cost you 4 spoons
Mhm.
that day.
Yeah. And so just to clarify, mostly this theory is adopted by people in the chronic illness community. They call themselves spoonies if they use this theory. And there's different, like on Twitter, on Facebook, on different social media platforms, there's communities built around this theory, so that people can relate to others that have the same kind of energy drain that they have. So even though it was originally kind of developed and adopted by people with chronic illness, it really applies, I think, to any of us. Like, I don't have a chronic illness, but I had a major medical event. And so, what I'm learning now is that before I had like really a lot of spoons. Like, I'm a high capacity, high energy person. And even though I struggled with depression, like for the most part, if I'm not depressed, I'm go, go, go all the time.
Yeah.
And now, since I have been recovering from my stroke, I have a lot fewer spoons. And I've had to decide in my day, okay, I know I want to do my basic hygiene items, but even showering became less because I'm just sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
Um, and I had to decide, okay, if I'm going to need to go with my family to the grocery store,
Yeah.
that means I'm not going to be able to go to some other errand or have this other visit with family or something. Like I have to, if I know there's a social obligation coming up and that it's going to be a 2 hour event or something like that, I'm not going to plan anything else in my day. I'm going to plan time on the couch so that I can store up energy or recuperate after um, having some kind of an event so that I can manage my spoons and make it to the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's so different, right? Because like you said before, it seemed like maybe you had seemingly endless spoons, right? Like you're, even though nobody gets unlimited spoons, right? Nobody gets unlimited, but you had enough spoons that it really wasn't anything you had to put a lot of thought or effort into, of just like, this is what I'm doing, I'm living life. And now there's an irony to this, isn't there? That now you're even having to, it might even take one spoon to think through how you're going to spend your spoons, because now you're having to budget them
Hmm.
and allocate them in the things that are your priority. And even like with showering, that might not be a priority that day because A, you're not expending a lot of energy, you're not sweating a lot,
Hmm.
and you want to spend more spoons, maybe sitting and talking with your family or playing a
Hmm.
board game or whatever it is, because that holds higher value and priority that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something that I just didn't really have to consider because there was always like a reservoir of energy that I had. And now I have the desire to do all of those things. I want to be social. I want to be productive. I'm at home during Christmas break wanting to clean out closets and things, but I know if I choose to do those things, then I have to borrow from something else. And the other thing that I'm borrowing from might be something that I really shouldn't, like being
Yeah.
able to care for my children, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think we didn't plan on talking about this today, but I had heard, yes, it's from TikTok. Listen, guys,
Okay.
I don't recommend that we diagnose ourselves off of TikTok. Take in what you read and hear on social media with just a critical view, right? Let's think critically about the things we hear. But I did hear this audio that I've seen circulated quite a bit, where he does talk about, he uses a non-podcast friendly word in in that audio that is just, it's not podcast friendly. So I'm going to change the language, where it
Okay.
talks about your cares that you have to give, right? And so
Oh,
what you're
yes.
kind of describing,
I can imagine what word you're talking about. Thank you.
uh
Okay.
yeah, what you're kind of describing there is, right now you have the care to give, you have that desire to get things done, but you don't necessarily have the energy, whether that's mental energy or physical energy or even emotional energy. It's just not there to give it. And what you're talking about is this awareness of that and being able to say, I have the care to give, but I don't have the spoon. I don't have that energy unit to give to it. Sometimes what we see when you're not, when I see people who don't understand this concept, is they, because they have the care to give, they either will have anxiety about it, and then that leads to this negative self-talk of like, I'm just so lazy, I'm so worthless, I'm an awful person because I want to get this stuff done and I'm not doing it. Or it leads to that push, I'm just going to push through, I'm going to ignore my spoons, I'm going to pretend like I have plenty of spoons. And then that leads to exhaustion.
Hmm.
Because here's the thing with the spoon theory, is that you can borrow spoons from the next day, but then that puts you in a deficit, right? And so then you're going to have less spoons the next day, and it can take days
Hmm.
to recoup your spoons. And so I think it is important. I really like that audio because it talks about the difference between having the energy to do it and then the motivation
Yeah.
to do it. And those are
Desire.
two, yeah, those are two really different things. Like, for example, if I don't have spoons and I don't have cares, that's going to look a lot like what we would think of as depression, right? Like that clinically depressed person who
Hmm.
they're just not wanting to get out of bed and they don't really care to get, just don't want to. I don't care and I don't have the energy. I'm not going to do it. But you might see situations even where someone has the spoons, so they have the energy, but they don't have the care. The motivation is just not there. So yeah, they might get it done, but they don't care. They don't care if it gets done
Or they're
or
going
not.
to use their energy more on personal fulfillment,
Yeah.
like going and seeking adventures, like
Yeah.
doing what they want to do for themselves.
Yes, but not necessarily those tasks that are necessities
Hmm.
that need to get done, but maybe they're just not as fun to do,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
There's no immediate gratification. And kind of what you're talking about, your pre-stroke self, I don't, is that appropriate to say? You can tell
Okay.
me or not. But is that like you had the spoons and the cares, so you
Hmm.
are able to really get a lot done. And so sometimes it can be helpful to differentiate. Like we're talking about spoons, we're not talking about motivation. We're
Hmm.
not talking about a desire. And I think when we bring those two things into focus, it can help us really understand today I really have the care to give, but I don't have the spoons. And what you're talking about here is such a healthy way of approaching that, of saying, okay, how can I practice kindness towards myself? And part of that kindness is what is important to me? What is important to me really when we build a values list or a priority list that I want to spend my spoons on? How can I spend what I do have to give well?
Yeah, exactly. If you've listened to the Soul Grit podcast for even one episode, you know my guests and I believe that when we integrate the power of God with the wisdom of modern psychology, we get supercharged healing, change, and growth in counseling. As a Christian therapist, however, I realize that there are many practitioners out there who are personally Christians but don't know how to integrate their faith into their counseling practices. That's why I created the e-course, Faith Integration for Therapists. In this premium 5-module course, therapists who love Jesus will learn everything from understanding their calling, to marketing their practices to Christians, to adapting evidence-based interventions to honor our faith. You can learn more about the online course at www.soulgritresources.com/courses and send an email to info@soulgritresources.com to receive a discount code. I know that there are some other directions that spoon theory has gone since in the last 20 years. People have kind of adapted it to the different needs. I just a quick Google images search pulled up infographics that talk about using spoon theory with mental illness, with neurodivergence, with different kinds of issues that you might have. And so I know, Jess, you did a little bit of research. Do you want to share with us some of these different branches?
Yeah, this is where I think spoon theory is kind of divine in and of itself, right? Because we feel like, man, spoons, what a random thing to choose. And I think some people have an issue with spoons because it's like, well, there are a lot of utensils in the kitchen that I can pull from. And I'm like, no, I really like spoon theory because of how people have been able to take spoon theory and relate it to other things using other utensils. So I think it's personally really cool. I think it fits better than even something like I've seen other people use metaphors of like currency or poker chips or stuff like
Mhm.
that, right? And that can be a great way to explain it. Except with spoon theory, we can look at it from other ways. So, one theory that I learned about was fork theory. Okay, so fork theory. So, think about a fork. A fork has these different prongs on it, right? Whereas a spoon, it's just a little bowl on a stick. That's how I'm gonna explain a spoon. Okay, and so we have forks with prongs, and fork theory is often used when talking about neurodivergence, such as ADHD, right? So think about ADHD and how one task. So when we talk about spoons, we're talking about one task, right? So we've talked about, for example, taking a shower.
Mhm.
That for someone who is not struggling with any type of illness, that might just be one spoon. But for someone with ADHD, just one individual task can actually quote unquote prong off. Okay, so it separates into many smaller tasks just to get that one task done. So, for example, let's continue with the idea of taking a shower. We've talked a lot about that. Well, when we're talking about taking a shower, I might just be like, okay, I need to take a shower. So I've got to go take a shower. But for someone with ADHD, that is broken down into, okay, so I need to get a towel. Okay, so now I'm going to go find my towel. And I realized while I'm finding the towel, I did not do the laundry that I had meant to do a few days ago. So because that's on my mind right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go start the laundry. So I turn on the washer, get it ready. And while I'm standing in the laundry room, I realize, oh no, the floor is dirty. So I go and get the broom and I sweep the floor. And I get the dustpan, I go dump it in the trash. Oh no, because I'm dumping it in the trash is full. So do you see all of my prongs now that I'm created? I'm just trying to take a shower over here. But now I have all these directions I'm going in. So then I take the trash out. And before I know it, I haven't even started the laundry all the way. I haven't put the soap in. I just started the washing machine and I still have not taken a shower. So
Mhm.
you can imagine from this idea of now we have all these prongs and directions that we're going in, how that looks a lot different than just it costing one spoon. And I like fork theory too, because have you ever heard that phrase, just put a fork in it? Which means we're done.
I'm done.
Right? So I heard someone explain it like this. So this actually can really speak to that concept of task paralysis.
Mm,
And so what task paralysis is it's this overwhelm of getting, it's hard to get things done because I'm not even sure where to start with it. So, say I'm trying to clean my kitchen, but then you think about cleaning a kitchen, you've probably got dishes, you've probably got trash, you might even have like bowls that you need to empty into the garbage disposal. There's a lot of steps to that, and that can feel really overwhelming. So then you think about all of those prongs that this one quote unquote simple task has turned into,
mhm.
poking you over and over and over again. You put a fork in it, you're done. Right? So that's task paralysis. But then I also learned about knife theory, which I thought was fascinating. It also applies to ADHD. It's under the category of fork theory. And it's where it's a way to explain the opposite end of that, which is hyperfocus.
Mhm.
And that's where we will stick with one task and we abandon all the other tasks that need to get done. And so it might be, I hyper focus on, for me, it was studying a couple weeks ago. That's all I did.
Mhm.
All I did was study at the cost of my health, at the cost of spending quality time with people, because I was with my knife. That's all I was doing, is I was sawing away at studying. So I think that this can just be a fun way to explain even what's happening if you're struggling in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's a good explanation. I hope that really helps some people understand um, what's going on sometimes with the energy expenditure, because sometimes you may feel like you said, I just need to do the dishes. Why is this so hard for me? Why can't I keep up with this? And
Yeah.
really, it has so much to do with all the other peripheral tasks that are involved in getting that done. It also reminded me a little bit of how, I'm just going to stereotype a little bit, but like men's and women's brains often work differently in some of these areas where men tend to be more singularly focused, like
Yeah.
one track mind will say,
Yeah.
but like the operating on a single task at a time, whereas a lot of times women will have like these tentacles that are reaching into all of these other things that need to get done while they're trying to accomplish one task.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of like the mental energy that's needed to go to the grocery store and pick up the groceries
Mm.
is just one small part of knowing what's already in your pantry and your fridge, creating a list, knowing what things you're going to want to cook that week, what groceries are going to be needed for that, what
Yeah.
order you're going to buy them in. Because if I'm making pad thai and I need bean sprouts, that's going to go bad in one day and I'm going to have to make that first. But I also know we have this evening event. And so I'm not going to be able to make it that day. But if I don't buy my groceries this day, like it
Yes.
goes into this whole expenditure of mental energy. So even though maybe one partner is doing the actual act of buying the groceries and driving to the store and putting them in the cart and paying for them and all of that, Like the person who is doing the mental energy may have already expended more spoons.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully our listeners are having the same reaction I'm having as you're talking about it, because I think this is something we don't talk about. But as you're talking about it, I'm like, you too? That happens to you too, because I sometimes can go into that place of like, I know that meal planning is important, both financially and health wise, right? But then I'm not doing it. And I had this conversation with my husband the other day because I'm just like, I know that this is important, but it's not getting done. And having to explain to him how much effort it takes me just to get the meal plan put together
Mhm.
because of that. I'm having to think through, what do we currently have? What are my kids gonna, y'all don't judge me.
Yeah.
What are my kids gonna eat?
No, that's a
Right?
whole other layer.
Yeah, because it's going to cost me energy if I'm having to fight with them to eat it, to beg them to eat it, however you want to look at it. And so by the time it's time for me to actually go to the store, I'm done. Like, put a fork in me because I'm done. Do you see all the prongs that are happening even in that piece? And as you're talking about it, there is this like part of me that, no, it doesn't like solve the problem, but it helps me to know, oh, I'm not alone in this. And this is part of what's going on and why I'm struggling to get the things done that I know are important and I know need to be done, but I'm unable to do them. I'm constantly bumping up against something. Um, that is such a great example because I think we all really struggle with that. And if you don't break it down like that, it's hard to realize
Well,
what the
because I
cost
know
is.
in your family, like sometimes your husband does do the grocery shopping, sometimes your husband does do the cooking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet, I don't, and I'm not going to speak for you guys, but I don't know if he knows, is there enough mustard in the fridge, like, or does he know
Yes.
what's in the pantry? Does he know where to find these ingredients in the store? Like those things are all layers. Like in my family, I pretty much am the primary person that does all grocery shopping,
Yeah.
planning, and cooking. And so being out of that for a month and having to depend on other people to show up with meals or spaghetti and meatballs is typically a meal that my husband can handle. But
Yeah.
that's been really different because like you said, I have the cares to want to have healthy meals for my family. I don't have the spoons to be able to prepare them.
Yeah.
So
It's so hard, right? And yeah, so in my family, we've actually had to make a big adjustment, you know. So I kind of went through that adjustment a couple years ago when I started grad school, where my husband did pick up, he does probably 90% of the cooking
mhm.
in our house, but it requires me to do the meal planning. If I tell him what is to be made, he can do it, right? And he does really well at it. He's actually a better cook than I am, so he gets the award for that in our home. But it's all the stuff up leading to that cost, frankly, more spoons than I have to give some days. And it is very hard because I do have the cares to take care of my body, to feed my family nutritious meals, but to think through that
Yeah.
can be really difficult. It's most days easier to just be like, well, we'll just pop a pizza in the oven,
Right.
or we'll just call in something to be delivered. That takes way less spoons for me, and that can be really hard. So sometimes I do have that conversation with him of, I think we need to, when we're meal planning, think realistically about our future. I don't say it like this, but essentially think about our future spoons.
Yeah.
What are we actually going to have to give this week if we have, like we did our segment on busy families, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
if if we're spending spoons running from one event to the other event, we're busy with the church things, whatever it is, we might not have the time or the spoons to give to cook a, a full meal at home from scratch. That's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. But how can we adjust and make what I call those good enough choices for now, right? That help meet some of the cares, but not to the level that maybe my cares want to give, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that this is resonating with some people because, I would really like to have a podcast come out every week and I would like to be able to serve my full client load and I would like to be able to have a really fun time with my family over break, but I am not capable of all of those things. So what I've done is, just an episode here and there, and you're just going to have to be surprised about when one's coming out because I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
And I've kind of whittled it down to seeing about 5 or 6 clients over the course of the whole week, like
Yeah.
usually one a day because I got a spoon for that each day, but I need to recharge. And just seeing the people that, are really needing to not wait for me to recover.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of people that I'm seeing that are just, they're going to be okay with taking a month off of therapy
Yeah.
and, check in via text here and there and make sure everything's okay, offering them other clinicians that can help out if, something comes up and I'm not available. But just kind of whittling down, like, what's the most important thing for me to do right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I'm operating. And I really don't have a good idea of how long that's going to be. Like,
Yeah.
when you had your surgery in the fall, like they tell you, oh, it's probably about this many weeks until you're going to start to feel normal. But like you had said something like you bent over to do something with the dishwasher and then,
Mhm.
oh, well, that set me back a week,
Yep.
Like,
Yes. And you just don't know, right? And I think even that, like, I'm cleared now, but I still don't feel like my physical self that I did
yeah.
before. It's just different, right? And
And you're
that
not
can be,
going to.
yeah. And it can be so hard to just have that. I always tell people be kind to yourself. It's so hard to practice towards yourself. Can I issue maybe a challenge for our listeners and even ourselves? Because in the time that we, aren't recording the podcast, that time is still set aside in my schedule. And so I have set the challenge for myself to, during that time, do something that gives me spoons back.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about spending spoons
Mm,
and how things each day cost spoons. But I think it is important to understand there are certain things that we can do to help us either save spoons or add in spoons.
mhm.
And that's those self care activities, the things that feel like they fuel your soul, right? They're restorative to your soul.
Yeah.
And so I would even challenge listeners that the weeks that you go and you're trying to look for a new podcast from Soul Grit, and you don't find a new one, take that as a time to challenge yourself to say, okay, how am I going to spend the next 30 minutes doing something to add to my capacity, add to my energy bank, add to my spoons.
Yeah.
That has been a very useful thing for me to help me not feel like I'm just, floating on by, but this time is still purposeful.
Yeah. So with that, I do want to wrap us up, but this is a perfect opportunity because
Yeah.
whenever I do an interview, I ask them, "What are you doing for soul care?" So we'll end with this. Like
Yeah.
right now in your current life, what's adding spoons?
Adding spoons for me right now looks different than the last time you asked that, right? Because the
Hmm.
last time you asked that, I was like going for hikes, doing all this
Right.
activity. And right now, that's just not what I'm doing. And so, cuddling with my kids on the couch,
Mhm.
add spoons, talking to my teenage son when he's willing to talk to me, adds in spoons. That I really think for me right now, it's that dealing with my self talk. It's dealing with that, like, hey, it is okay. It is okay
Mhm.
to sit on the couch for several hours in a row. Like, that really is okay because I think sometimes I do that trying to add in physical spoons, but then expend the mental energy beating myself up. And so
Mhm.
then it's not really restful.
Mhm.
I have started listening to audiobooks that I want to listen to. So
Mhm. That's
that's at,
a post grad school thing to do.
and it is such, yes, it's so life-giving. I had to take a little break from just listening to anything at all because my mental spoons were shot. They were just gone. But now that I'm getting those back, listening to things I want to listen to. What about you, Anne? What are you doing right now to give
Yeah.
spoons back and take care of your soul?
Well, sleeping as much as I need to
Yeah.
because I can have, and normally I can have that like rush of I have to be productive, so I have to get up at a certain time and stay up late and just go, go, go. And right now I'm just like, I even told my family for Christmas, like, we're not going to do it super early because I need to sleep. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I ended up waking up early anyway, so that didn't matter. But um sleeping, and then you know, I really had this period of time when I was in the hospital where I just felt like God went really quiet. Like I had to really
Mm,
like
yeah.
bend my ear to see if he was saying anything. And
Yeah.
it's been a month since I got released from the hospital. And so I have just kind of searched myself for how can I re-engage with my spiritual life when I don't have a lot of spoons even to give in that area.
Yeah.
And one of the things that my husband and I started doing for Advent is called there's a book called Common Prayer. It's
Mm,
Shane Claiborne and some other authors, and some parts of it feel really weird to me because I don't come from a liturgical background,
yeah.
but parts of it I'm really appreciating right now because it's very scripted. So we're reading this together. It's meant for communal time together. There's always a call and response from the Psalms.
Mm,
There's like a written prayer that you read. There's a written cadence that you say together. We're always reading a section of the Old Testament and a section of the New Testament. And just going through that every day with my husband, it takes 15 or 20 minutes and
mm,
it's predictable. It's not requiring a whole lot of mental energy because it's kind of just there for you. You just have to step in and participate.
mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that's something that has just kind of helped to keep me on track, and I
Yeah.
don't have to have like you said, that mental energy of beating myself up that I'm not doing enough in my spiritual life, you know?
Yeah, I think, and this will be the final thing I say because I know we've taken up a lot of our listeners' time. So it's okay. Because I think as you're talking about that, it takes me back to what I was saying with those good enough meals, right? Like how sometimes I think we do put a lot of pressure on our spirituality to say, like, oh, I need to sit down and read the Bible and dive into commentaries and do this for an hour a day. And when we don't have spoons for that, then I often, and I'll just be very honest about this, can step into an all or nothing mentality of like, I can either do that for a whole hour and put all of this energy into it, or I'm not doing anything.
Hmm.
And so such a good reminder as we're talking about spoons. Spoons don't just apply to physical energy. We have different categories you can apply them to. And if you don't have the mental energy to read a whole chapter, even of the Bible, just reading a couple verses,
Hmm.
right? It's good enough. Like, we don't have to go above and beyond. That's the equivalent of a quick microwavable bag of broccoli, right?
Sweet
And
vegetables.
just shove it in the microwave. It's good enough, right? Like it
Yeah,
gets the job done. Yeah, I like that.
that's good. The one last thing I would say that is helping is I'm letting people help me, which
Mm,
is its
mhm.
own issue, because I like to be the one to help other people and I like to be the one to be self-sufficient and do
Yeah.
everything. But there have been people that have asked if they can send a meal or cook a meal or DoorDash a meal or or come and sit with me or help give my kids rides or things like that. And I've just had to say, okay, yes, you can do that.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
my impulse is to say, oh, no, 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 you don't need to do that. I don't want to put you out. That's the impulse. But what I need to do is to allow them to have the opportunity to serve and help that way.
Yeah.
So,
It's so important. And so difficult. It can be really hard, but it is really important too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Perfect.
Um, thanks, Jess, for the conversation today. And Jess is the one that really does a lot of the research into this. So thank you for doing that too. So I can just come on here and be able to talk to you about these things.
Yeah.
And listeners, I hope that you have a happy new year and we will be back whenever we're back. We don't know exactly when, and we'll
Yeah.
be bringing some new stuff for the new year.
Yeah. We're just going to trust the process.
We're going to trust the Lord.
Yes, we are.
The Soul Grit podcast is a production of Soul Grit Resources. You can find more at soulgritresources.com or on the socials at Soul Grit Resources. You can email me at info@soulgritresources.com.